there wasn't any resource out there that simplified everything I learned in law school for a younger age demographic. One of the things I notice is that the only people who know the law are attorneys. But I personally believe that every American should at least have a baseline understanding of our laws and legal system. Because if they do, and if they learn it earlier on, it's really going to help them out in the future.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe.
Hey, have you seen these books before? Run Your Corporation, Start Your Corporation, and Loopholes of Real Estate? Well, these books are written by the gentleman who is joining me today on this podcast called Garrett Sutton. It is him and his son are both together in this interview, in this podcast, and I'm super stoked to have them both. They're here to talk about everything about LLCs, asset protection, and insurance, part of asset protection, to talk about how important they are and how crucial they are for protecting your investments. Now, I had a lot of fun in this podcast talking to them both. We got to cover a lot of those frequently asked questions that I've heard many times by others ask when I was learning about real estate, but also questions that I've had myself. And to be frank, sometimes I still hear these questions by people, my colleagues that will say, Arita or Steven, my last name, Arita, what do you think about this? And so I get these answered by the people. I get them answered by the attorneys, by the guy who literally wrote the book, multiple books, and his son about asset protection and what you need to know. So definitely check out this episode and go and check out some of the links. They're launching new education platforms. TED is writing a book, which should get released sometime next year. Listen to the very end of why that's so important for your kids to be able to understand what that book is going to be written about as well. And, just take note of what some of these questions are so you can make sure that you are protected as well. Because one thing is for sure, asset protection is the thing you need to know about and you should be doing ahead of time. No one wants to pay, as an example, for insurance, but you're sure glad that you have it when you need it. So if you want to be notified of this episode, in future episodes like this, please go to my newsletter as well. You can go to aritacapital.com, sign up for the newsletter. Also got some resources for you there too, to make sure you get those to your inbox every 2 weeks. So check out this episode, check out those resources by Garrett and Ted, and please sign up for that newsletter. As always, you can connect with me on LinkedIn for anything direct. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, I am super stoked to have two guests here that I've been reading one of their books for a really long time, but to have Garrett and his son, Ted Sutton, here is so cool. If you don't know them, they're part of the Rich Dad Advisors. I'm holding up the books right now. We have a couple of these that have been an absolute amazing reference for me on my real estate and business journey here. And if you haven't picked these up, absolutely go ahead and check those out. Even before hearing today's episode, definitely go and get them. They will provide a tremendous amount of value. So Garrett and Ted Sutton, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. For those that don't know who you are, please go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive in.
Great. Well, thanks for having us, Stephen. I appreciate it. And my name is Garrett Sutton, and I'm based in Reno, Nevada. I moved to Nevada from California, like so many others have. But way back in the day, back in 1989. And Nevada is a great place to set up a corporation or an LLC. And I've been doing that kind of corporate formation and maintenance work since early on. And I was very fortunate to become associated with Robert Kiyosaki and his team. And we've traveled the world talking about financial education, and my section is on asset protection. You're going to buy real estate, you're going to build up your estate, and we want to protect it because we live in a very litigious society. And so my son Ted here wanted to join us. So I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, but I didn't want to join him at first. And so that's what I kind of want to get to briefly. So I was born and raised in Reno. My dad moved here before he met my mom, and I was born. So went to high school here. Then I went to college at the University of Utah in Salt Lake, where I got a degree in mining engineering.
Nice.
So I had no intention of being a lawyer, but the summer before I graduated, I worked at a mine in northern Chile for 3 months. And it was a great experience, but it made me realize that wasn't the career path for me. So after I graduated, my parents sat down with me and they said, Ted, look, Dad's going to retire at some point. You could go to law school and eventually take over his practice in the future.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I'm going, okay, well, I think that might be it. I wasn't finding work. And, that just gave me a path forward. So made the decision to go to law school in Wyoming, graduated 3 years ago, and now I'm licensed to practice in 3 states. And now I'm working alongside him and slowly pushing him out. So
great father and son dynamic. I love it.
Yeah, pushing me out.
Gently. I'm not forcing you out.
Complementary skill sets.
There we go.
I'm curious, Ted, what was that that you talked about not finding work, but were there any other aha moments as well for you, thinking maybe this mining and engineering thing wasn't what you wanted to do for a while?
Well, I think before I got that internship at a mine in Chile, we actually went down to Santiago the year before that internship. And we went down on a business trip for a Rich Dad event. So my dad, he took me, I think Andy Tanner was there, Tom Wheelwright was there, and of course Robert was there. And so I didn't really think of it at first, but I think having had that experience, then working at the mine in Chile, and then graduating without a job and kind of reaching a dead end, I think those things kind of added up over time. So it was just kind of like there were a few breadcrumbs on the trail before that aha moment came. And then I just said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do this.
Got it. And I have to ask, I mean, obviously we're here to talk asset protection. We're here to talk about, insurance and all the things to protect the investors, certainly. But it's cool to meet the both of you and talk to the both of you. And I'm sure I would be doing a disservice to all of the, folks who know the Rich Dad advisors, like, you, Garrett, and your team, some of these other people you talked about as well, Ted, to ask, what was that like for you, Ted? What was that like to grow up around all these advisors, and as well as get some of this, from your dad as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's been great. It wasn't really forced upon me as a kid. When I was really little, my dad would go on these Rich Dad events all around the world where it was Robert and Blair and my dad and whoever else. So I knew it was there. It was what my dad did for work. But my dad kind of slowly eased my way into it. So I think the first event I attended was in high school. So, I was around it, but my dad was kind of smart and he just kind of slowly eased my way into it. But I think it's been great. I was a kid. When I was a kid, I wasn't really focused on financial education.
Sure.
But, sort of that slow introduction to where I am now. It's been great. I've learned a lot. And I think recently it's really improved my life being around a bunch of people who are financially literate and who can help take people to the next step.
Definitely. And I don't know if you didn't get all of the, the education there. I just saw Garrett your dad talk about how, he was talking with Robert about cash flow and the games and how you guys have done some of that. So I'm sure that was part of it. Yeah, I see the head nod. Absolutely. Garrett, you've been doing this, helping investors, helping business owners for 35 plus years, right? And
Right.
you've been getting a ton of questions, and some of these questions I'm going to ask, I have to, because I get these questions here too. And I'll be like, you should go read this book or go check this stuff out, in classic fashion. One of the things I've seen Tom Wheelwright speak a number of times, and he always opens up his, you know, speaking engagement saying, how many people have read Rich Dad Poor Dad? A couple of, most of the room will go up, and then some of those, hands will stay down, and you'll say, good. Now Robert knows he still have a few more customers out there. So I just want you to know that I've helped to get some more customers for you as well with your books. But nonetheless, talk to me a little bit about why asset protection. Sounds ridiculous, but we're here to talk about why asset protection, and we'll talk about insurance as well. But I really want to just do a baseline and then work our way up here, because there's still misconceptions. People see real estate, but they don't think about this stuff as much, right?
Well, why asset protection? I think you can look at every third billboard, in a wreck, get a check. The system rewards attorneys for suing people. They're on a contingency fee, but they collect a third to 40% of the claim. And that's the system. We're not going to change it. But knowing the system, there are other elements within the system that we can use to help protect ourselves. And especially if you're investing in real estate, there are tenants out there that know that if they fall, they can collect against you. And we don't want them going after your personal assets. If they sue, they can sue you personally. If you hold title in your individual name, all your assets are exposed. But if your duplex that you invested in is in an LLC, they can get what's inside the LLC, the equity in the duplex, but they can't get beyond it to reach your personal assets. And so that's why I've been traveling the world with Robert and the Rich Dad Advisor team, just to let people know this, because, Stephen, they don't teach this in school.
Definitely.
In fact, they don't even teach asset protection in law school. You've got to get it on your own. So, I mentioned the LLC for the asset protection. And I said that a tenant can get what's inside the LLC. Well, that means we don't want to put 10 properties in one LLC. We don't want to create a target-rich LLC. So maybe 1 or 2 properties per LLC. But these are all the things we teach, and it's also in all the books. But your audience, they want to buy real estate and grow their wealth. And at the same time, as you get started, you just need to think right off the bat, how am I going to protect this? And that's why we use asset protection.
Yeah, it's a great call, right? To the litigious society, right? You mentioned that instead of to have these LLCs where you might have a handful of properties, or in some cases you mentioned 2, right? Do you have any guidance on where someone might think more or less? I've had properties and I've just done 1 LLC per, so I'm kind of curious.
That's the best, right? So, but it's a judgment call. The client makes the decision. My job is to tell them what the landscape is. Here's the issue if you put 5 into 1 LLC, and here you're better protected if you only use 1 LLC per property, but it's their call. So I always let them make the decision. I don't have a hard and fast rule that says, well, once you cross $1 million, you got to have a new LLC. It's really up to the client, but the client needs to appreciate that you don't want too many properties in 1 LLC.
Outstanding. Now, before we started recording, we were talking about the audience as well, and how, this is the show is, path to passive, and many of them, the audience is people that will be accredited investors. They're tech professionals. They're making multiple 6 figures, and they're looking at doing things that are more passive. What's the thinking around maybe doing syndications or investing in something else like that in their own name versus something else? Do you have any guidance around that?
Well, let's say you're going to invest in a limited partnership syndication, right? By definition, you're a limited partner in that. So your risk is what you put into the amount you invested into the deal. So if you invest $10,000 and something goes horribly wrong at the property, The general partner is personally responsible, which is why the general partner will always use an LLC for the general partnership holding entity. But you, as the limited partner, by definition, are limited to what you invested. Now, that said, if you get in the car wreck and the syndication's in your personal name, someone with a judgment against you could get that limited partnership interest. So many of our clients will invest in syndications through their own, for example, Wyoming LLC. And that just gives you a little bit more protection, and it's not expensive. I mean, Wyoming charges $62 a year for the annual fee. Your name doesn't show up on the state website. So a lot of our clients like investing in syndications, not in their personal name, but through their own LLC.
Got it. That's a key point, because then, like you talked about the car crash, that individual still holds that interest in their own name. So it's in their best interest, not to use the word multiple places, but to think about protecting that as well, right?
Right.
You know, you said something there that I wanted to click on, which is kind of crazy. But you said even in law school, they won't talk about asset protection. You know, is that what you're seeing as well, even now, Ted? I mean, like, are you getting this osmosis of all this cool stuff from asset protection by working with your father?
Yeah, pretty much everything I learned about asset protection was through him. It's a very unique subset of the law. It's not taught in law schools. I think in my corporations class, my teacher briefly touched on the charging order protection once. And that's also because we were in Wyoming. So they know a tiny bit about it there. But in other law schools, they don't teach it.
Can you talk about what that is too?
Yeah. Oh, the charging order? Sure. So what the charging order is it's a lien on the distributions from your LLC whenever you're sued personally. So my dad talked about how you could get into a car accident. I mean, that's very common. And when that happens, they're not going after your business. They're going after you personally. So in that situation, there's a chance insurance denies coverage. So in that case, they would take you to court. They could potentially win in court and get a judgment against you. And in order to satisfy that judgment, that creditor, the car wreck victim, is going to want to reach your assets to satisfy that judgment. So if you have stocks, real estate, syndication in a Wyoming LLC, what they would do is they would get a charging order on that Wyoming LLC, which is a lien on the distributions out of it. So what that means is if you make distributions out, they collect. But with the charging order, you have the control whether or not distributions are made. So if you don't take any money out, they have to sit there and wait. And they don't like that. And their attorneys certainly don't like that either, because insurance is the easy money pot for them to get after. They do not want to go to Wyoming to domesticate a judgment, get a charging order on that LLC. It places more roadblocks in place between your assets and your personal liability. And so that's why we like using Wyoming LLCs that offer the charging order protection to hold title to your assets.
So the attorneys, you know, if you have enough insurance, and I always recommend our clients have an umbrella policy where your home and auto are insured by the same company, and you ask them for the umbrella coverage, and $1 million is only $500 a year, you know, so you get in that horrific car wreck, and there's enough money for the attorneys to get at, and they don't want to mess with the charging order in Wyoming. It's a big pain for them. So they're economic animals. They want to go to the next case that has insurance. And you can't blame them for that. And so what we do is we have our clients have enough insurance, both on their personal, and certainly if you own a duplex, you're going to have insurance coverage there. And then you have these Wyoming LLCs owning the state holding LLCs. Like if you have a property in Utah, you'd have a Utah LLC owned by the holding Wyoming LLC. And that structure really works well because the attorneys can collect the insurance money and they leave you alone on the assets you want to protect.
So they'll actually get the amount of cash basically from the insurance, and they're saying, cool,
Right.
I got something out of this, but I can leave the asset alone because that's too much work because of the LLC asset protection, but the insurance is what takes care of them as economic animals, so to speak.
Right. And it's important to know that the choice of state is important because California has a very weak LLC law. California, if you're in the car wreck, the court says, go ahead, barge in and force the sale of the property in the California LLC. New York is a weak state. Utah is a weak state. So we need to understand which states we don't want to use for protection, and the good states, which are Nevada, Delaware, Wyoming, and now Texas. These are the good states we want to use as the holding entity because they offer the charging order protection.
It's such a weird thing to hear for the first time around, right? Like, why would these be weak or why would these be stronger? I mean, we're talking around. You explained charging protection and associated that to Wyoming, so the listener gets that a bit more here as well. But like, can you just expand like what makes this a weak LLC, especially when California, New York, aren't these places supposed to be like where a lot of business is done?
Right. Well, I love the history here, Stephen, but I'll let Ted tell it.
Cool.
Yeah, so a lot of this depends upon what's in the state statute. So each state in their LLC Act, they have something that says either the charging order protection or, collection of a creditor of a member. So if an LLC member is personally sued, what can the creditor get? So in the Wyoming statute at the bottom, it exclusively says that the charging order is the exclusive remedy that a creditor can collect from an LLC.
Cool.
Wyoming's one of those states. You got Delaware, Nevada, Texas. There's a few others. But there's other states out there like California and Utah that do not have that language in the statute that says the charging order is the exclusive remedy.
Okay, let me tell the history then.
Okay.
The history goes back to the American Revolution, where not only were we fighting the British Crown, but we were fighting the British East India Company, which was this giant corporation. It was like Walmart and Amazon rolled into one. I mean, they were huge, and they were coming in and with the British Crown to try and put down the revolution. And each state decided they wanted their own corporate law. Now, in most countries, corporate law is national. Right? I mean, you have a national corporate law for Chile, for example. But in the United States, because of the revolution, each state wanted their own law. Now, what that means is that certain states compete against each other to be the best. So you have this competition between Nevada, Delaware, and Wyoming to offer the best law because they get to collect the revenue for the annual filings. So it's kind of interesting how the history developed out of the American Revolution and why we, as one of the few nations, have corporate laws state by state.
Yeah, that is very interesting because ultimately, like you're talking about, what that means is that's where business, if you have more protection, you're more protected. That's where you would want to go. Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because you were talking about, I think it was, the example was, if you had that duplex in Utah, you would have that property in the Utah LLC in state, and then you would have it, the Wyoming would hold interest or own that in-state LLC, correct?
Correct.
And so how do those two work together then, the in-state and Wyoming? What supersedes the asset protection then? Clearly the Wyoming does then, right?
Yeah, but both LLCs are they're designed to protect against two different types of attacks. So the Utah LLCs formed to hold title to the Utah property. And that Utah LLC protects you against the inside attack, which is something that relates to the LLC's purpose. So that's where you have a tenant on the property, they trip and fall. Well, in that case, they would sue the Utah LLC and they would only be able to reach what's inside of it. Now, where the Wyoming LLC comes into play on the top is in the outside attack. And so that's where you're personally sued, you get into the car wreck. But with that, you have the charging order protection there. Now, the Wyoming LLC is key because it acts as a shield for all of your real estate holdings beneath it. If you own the Utah LLC in your individual name, there's no charging order protection. So it'd be easy for the car wreck victim to reach what's inside the Utah LLC. So it's important because both of them work in tandem, and they protect against two different types of attacks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And so a lot of people are probably thinking about, these are some of the other questions that I'll hear, and I surely, had as well. And I'd love for you to dive into these parts, which is, is there anything I can do about like my own residence? Would I have this in an LLC, or do I need to keep it in my name? And then the follow on, if you can wrap it into that answer, is the investment property. What if I already own, a rental out there? Is it too late for me to do something with that?
Well, do you want to talk the personal residence, and I'll talk the second one?
Sure. Okay. I don't really know if I have a choice, but I can do both. I'm just kidding. All right. So when it comes to your personal residence, we first like to look at the homestead exemption. And so what that is it's a filing that you perform in your county recorder's office. And each state law is different. It all varies by state. But what it does is it shields a certain amount of home equity from creditors. So I'm in Nevada. The homestead exemption here is about $580,000. And, with that, I just have the homestead filing, and that shields all the home equity that I have. I don't have it in an LLC. There's other states out there that are really good, like Texas and Florida, where the homestead exemption amount is unlimited. So you do that filing, and your home equity is protected. But there's other states out there like Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which don't have the homestead exemption at all. So you can't do a filing, you can't shield any home equity. So ultimately, it depends first upon what state you're in. If you have one with a good homestead exemption, just do that. But if you live in a state with none, it may make sense to use an LLC. And then the second consideration is how much home equity you have. If your home's only worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe you do a homestead filing. But if you have a home that's worth millions of dollars, like north of $5 or $10 million, in that case, it makes sense to just form an LLC for that.
Okay.
And you only get one homestead. It's for your personal residence. So if you had a home in Florida and a home in California, you only get one, and you'd probably use Florida because it protects everything. But you can get the form at Office Depot. I mean, it's very easy to file a homestead, and you just pay a $20 fee usually to the county recorder. So you can do this yourself. Now, the second question was, if I have an LLC in my personal name, is it too late to put it into if I have a property in my individual name, is it too late to put it into an LLC?
Exactly.
And the answer is no, except for one little wrinkle. So let's say, Stephen, you have a duplex. It's in your individual name. It's time to set up an LLC. And then you set up the LLC, but then the second key element is you got to transfer title. You've got to have a realtor or a title company, or you yourself transfer the title from your name into the name of the LLC. And some states have a little transfer tax, so you have to be aware of that. Pennsylvania is the worst. They have a 2% transfer tax. So on a $1 million property, that's $20,000. So when you take title in Pennsylvania, you want to take title in the LLC right to begin with. Now, the little wrinkle is, when can you not transfer title from your name into the LLC? And that's when you've been sued. If title is in your name and you're sued, you can try and transfer it into an LLC, but the court would have the ability to say, you transferred it after you were sued, you're trying to put this asset out of the reach of creditors, we're going to order you to transfer it back into your name. So all this means, Stephen, is you've got to take care of things right now, right? You don't know if you're going to get sued or not, but it could happen. So you want to make sure that title to these properties is in the name of the LLC before there's ever a problem.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the game, right? You were talking insurance, we're talking asset protection. You got to do it ahead of time. You know,
There's one more thing with insurance. When you transfer title from your name into the LLC, you've got to let the insurance company know that title's in the LLC. You want them to insure the LLC. Now, some insurance companies will say, well, gee, Stephen, an LLC is a business. We have to charge you a higher premium. And so what you do is say, okay, leave the premium in my name, the lower premium, but list my LLC as an additional insured.
nice.
And they don't charge you for that, and that will keep you covered.
Pro tip, definitely. So that's the case where, this someone already the investor, the person has we're talking for the investment property that already exists. What does that look like for someone who's looking to acquire another property?
You mean for like if they have a structure in place and they want to buy another property?
If someone is looking to buy an investment property, what are the steps that they would have to do just at that high level to make sure that they're doing the acquisition and also have an entity in place?
Right. So they want when they do the purchase offer, they want to say Stephen and or assigns, meaning they can assign the contract to a LLC to be formed in the future. Now, if you go through with the purchase, then you're going to form the LLC. Some states we can do it in a day. Other states take 2 weeks. So you want to give yourself enough time, but you want to form that LLC, and then at closing, you want the escrow and title officer to know that title will be held in the name of the LLC. So, and the title companies all know how to do this.
Yeah. But I think the big key here is you want to make sure that you have your LLC in place ahead of time. Recently I've dealt with clients where they're rushing to get an LLC and they're closing the next day. In that situation, it can be a nightmare because sometimes the Secretary of State can drag their feet and it can take a few days. So I like telling people to give yourself 1 or 2 months in advance to set up the LLC and then close on the property. Just because you're not rushing in the 11th hour to get something done, when you can just have peace of mind just setting it up ahead of time.
Yeah, good to have in place. So then, I have to ask here too, because people are, we're always thinking cost benefits, right? We're all economic creatures here for sure. What does that look like? Many of the listeners, super analytical. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Very tech focused. So, the thinking is very much just in time, JIT, right? Throughout some lean manufacturing terms as an example. And so, it's like, do I need this thing 2 months ahead of time? Good to have. But there are kind of these small but death by 1,000 paper cut questions like, okay, Ted, what am I going to name this thing? I've heard I should name it after the property. What should I do there? Is it, what if I don't buy a property? What do I do then? Do I spin it down?
Right.
So just some small things. Could you just address those quickly?
Yeah, and I agree that what if you don't buy the property? So you want to form the entity when you're pretty sure you're going to buy the property, right? You could set it up ahead of time, but some people, things happen. So if you know you're going to buy the property and you call us ahead of time and say, how long does it take to form an entity in Utah versus California? Mm-hmm. Each state is different. Wyoming and Nevada, we can get it done in a day. So, that's one option. But you want to have the LLC set up before you close, because if you give them the name of an LLC, but it's not yet formed, that creates a huge problem. And so let's say that the state you are going to form in says, well, it's going to take 5 days and you're supposed to close in 3. Just extend the escrow closing, right? You want to have that LLC properly formed before you close.
Got it. So pushing out escrow is one of the levers that can be used so that you do get some more time, provided you know what the average amount of time is, pending the Secretary of State, to get that LLC
Right.
created.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
someone's not going to complain if you need 2 days to get the LLC formed. I mean, that shows that you're in the process of preparing everything for closing.
I've heard there's a question that comes up. I've heard it. I'm wondering if you could shed some light on this. I don't know who this question is for, but I'll ask it. Is we talked about there's a second line of defense for real estate investors, and then there's recommending having 2 LLCs as well. Can you just clear these things up? If maybe we've already talked about parts of that, you can just kind of point out and label those for me.
Yeah, the first line of defense is insurance, right? We're never going to say you're going to set up an LLC and you don't need insurance. The first line of defense is insurance, right? You want that fire and general liability insurance when you're renting out properties. But insurance companies have an economic incentive to not cover every claim, and they've got all sorts of exclusions. So the second line of defense is the LLC. And so we always want to have that LLC on title to the property, so that if something bad happens, they're not going after all of your personal assets. And then just to talk about the second line of defense, having 2 entities, the Utah LLC is on title. It is owned by the one Wyoming LLC, which is passive. The Wyoming LLC doesn't do business with anyone. If it ever got sued, the Wyoming LLC is sued, they could reach the Utah LLC. So we don't want the Wyoming LLC to be actively in business. It's passive. But let's say you buy a property in Nebraska. We set up a Nebraska LLC, and it can be owned by the same Wyoming LLC. We don't need to set up a new Wyoming every time.
Very cool. Cool. I saw those questions, and I just had to ask. Now, you've talked about, we're using this example for the conversation about the person who gets in the car crash, right? So they can't, if they get sued, then they can't access properties in the local state LLC or, that additional protection for Wyoming. Now, there's a bunch of other, potentially other assets this person might have, including the car. Well, that car, car that they would have, but there's other assets these people might have. Do we recommend that they have their personal assets and some other form of asset protection? Because so far we're just talking about properties, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on the nature of the asset. When it comes to cars, in a lot of cases, we don't recommend them. Just one reason is that title transfers for cars can be a nightmare. Another thing is that if you ever get into a car accident, they're going to come after you personally. So that's one of the reasons why we don't, or 2 reasons why we don't like using LLCs for cars. However, we do like using LLCs for assets like gold, silver, bullion, stocks, cash, if you have a large amount of cash, and crypto. So if you have any sort of assets like that have some sort of intrinsic value, we recommend using an LLC for those.
Awesome. So far we've talked about our properties having asset protection in the case of this scenario where someone gets in a car crash, and making sure the properties aren't accessible through these 2 lines of defense, right? The local LLC as well as the Wyoming. But what about the person who might have other assets, right? Should those go in some other type of protection as well?
I think so. I think if you have a brokerage account, gold, silver, crypto, you set up a holding LLC for that. Maybe it is separate than the Wyoming holding LLC for the real estate. Maybe have a Nevada LLC that holds all of your other assets, paper assets, crypto assets. We don't really like putting cars in LLCs unless they're collectors' cars, because when you're driving around town and you get in an accident, you're personally responsible anyway, right? So they're going to sue you personally. It doesn't matter if the car's in an LLC or not. So, and plus, as Ted has seen, transferring title from your name into an LLC at the DMV is not pleasant.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Must have some stories on that one. What's the thinking? Is that heavy-handed? When does it, kind of be a consideration to this is the absolute best practice? I know this is a wide range for many of the clients I'm sure you've worked with, but just maybe some questions to think about, some big picture guidance on that.
Well, best practice is what you're doing, Stephen, because you have a separate LLC for each property, right? That is the best practice. And then when you have other assets that someone could reach after a car wreck, your brokerage account with Charles Schwab, your crypto wallet, these are all things that can be held in LLCs for asset protection. And too many people think about the real estate, like you're mentioning, and forget about these other assets, which people can reach in a lawsuit. So we want to protect everything that we can.
Should those ones is an in-state LLC good enough for the personal assets as well? Like wherever that person resides?
Well, it depends on the personal asset. So, if it's a brokerage account for your stocks, a crypto wallet, things of that nature, in a lot of cases, we like using Wyoming LLCs just because of the charging order protection that they offer. If you're a California resident, you need to register it in California. But usually, if you have some sort of connection to the state, personal assets, not as much, but if you have a business or a rental property in your home state, you can use an LLC for that. But for passive investments, in most cases, a Wyoming or a Nevada works.
Right. You can choose what state you want to set up in. And, a brokerage account is fine in Nevada. You're not doing business in that state, but you've set up in Wyoming. You're holding the assets in Wyoming. Wyoming has no state income tax, so there's no filing. State tax filing you have to do. Same with Nevada. So these are good states because they provide excellent asset protection. There's no state tax. And many of our clients have used, especially Wyoming LLCs, for these types of purposes.
Super cool. And I mean, for more specific types of questions, best thing to do is reach out to you and your team, right? Both of you, to get the most specific guidance, because this is way too general, right? There's good best practices here and great things, but everything is going to be more specific, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's all fact specific and it all depends upon your specific circumstances. But if you have any questions, you can go to corporatedirect.com. We have a lot of resources there. You can also schedule a free 15-minute consultation to speak to one of our knowledgeable incorporating specialists. And yeah, if you have any legal questions, you can set up a call with one of us and we'd be happy to talk.
Cool. I mean, I've seen some of the videos, Ted. Good to see some of those on YouTube as well. Good to see both of you on there. It's cool to, make, it's just such important information, I think, is, I don't have to tell you guys, it's too much of an afterthought, right? So what are some of the, I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't ask, what are some of those common questions that, the both of you hear from people that is like, yeah, okay, these, we're going to have to make sure we cover this with new clients and stuff like that. Let's get that out of the way. Maybe you can give some of those common questions, some answers here as well.
Yeah. One of the most common questions is, can I set this up after I bought the property? And you would address this earlier, Stephen. And yeah, if you owned a property in your individual name for 5 years, you're free to transfer title from your name into the name of the LLC. So it's not like you're locked in once you have title in your individual name. You're free to transfer it, subject to not being sued at the time. But, I think that's one of the common misconceptions is that you're locked into your title, and you're not. You can always transfer it. Another one is, well, okay, I took title in my individual name and I have a bank loan. And will the bank call the note when I transfer title from my name to the LLC? And we just don't see that happen. First of all, the bank's position hasn't changed, right? When you transfer title from your name into the LLC, the bank still has your personal guarantee. Mm-hmm. They still have a first deed of trust against the property. That doesn't change. So the bank's position is the same, whether title's in your name or in an LLC. And the other thing is that you haven't sold the property. People worry about a due on sale clause. You haven't sold the property. You've just transferred it from you to you. Now, 20 years ago, the banks were a little squirrely about all this, but lately they've gotten much better and they understand. And I think the banks realize that if title is in your LLC name, that also protects the bank. It means you're less likely to be sued. So the bank is in a better position, I would argue, by having your title in the name of an LLC.
Yeah, that's a really good reframe, I think, for a lot of people who would parrot these type of things. So it's super cool to get some clarity on that. How about you, Ted? Is there anything that comes to mind in conversations you have with people, or maybe you can answer a different question? Maybe some common mistakes you see people do.
Yeah, well, I was going to go to the fact that it's important to talk about questions that we commonly get. But another thing is that there's questions that people don't ask, which I think they should be asking. And one of the things is there's a lot of people who just set up an LLC and they think it's a one-time deal. But the reality is, in order to have that liability protection moving forward, you need to perform annual maintenance. Setting up the LLC is only 10% of it. The other 90% relates to performing ongoing maintenance to make sure that your LLC is in good standing, that you're following all the corporate formalities to ensure that you're treating your personal affairs and your LLC separately, and that you have paperwork and a bank account and all these things to show that you're treating your affairs separately, and of course paying filing fees and a registered agent. So that's one of the things that I've seen people mess up on, is they just set it up once and then they think they're good to go. But if you're an attorney that's playing offense and you see that they aren't following the corporate formalities, it's really easy for that attorney to pierce the corporate veil to reach your personal assets. So, when you set up the LLC, you need to be treating everything separately after you set it up.
And this is so important. I wrote a whole book on it called Veil Not Fail. And, attorneys are succeeding 50% of the time in piercing the veil. 50% of the time they're going through the corporate to get at the person.
Is that because of the maintenance not done? Is that because of the maintenance and that care and feeding of?
Yeah, they follow the formalities. So the formalities are really easy to follow. You pay the annual fee, you do the minutes every year, you've got a registered agent, you got a separate bank account, you're not using your personal account for business and vice versa. But if you don't follow these simple rules, the results can be really catastrophic because they can get through the corporation or LLC and get at your personal assets. We don't want that to happen.
Definitely do not want that to happen. One of the things, I'll mention this and then we'll pivot to another topic before we close out. Appreciate your time here. It's that the thing I've heard is that if you don't treat your entities and treat your business like a business, then why should the government see it that way either? And so,
right.
That's true.
Well, that's effectively the alter ego doctrine. I mean, if they're one and the same, the court's going to treat it as one and the same, and they're going to pierce the veil and reach your personal assets.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge here, both of you. And I know that you're big on financial education. How can you not be? Having it from a personal values and mission, of course, what you do with Robert, the other Rich Dad Advisors, et cetera, right? And, you're also launching a financial education YouTube platform, as well. This is
I saw it written, but I'd like you to help you expand on it. This is TENERO financial education. Is that right?
Correct. TENERO is a combination of the Spanish word tener, to have, and dinero, money. So we combine those two words to TENERO. Nice. And if you go to YouTube, it's TENERO Official. And we have all these videos for kids and adults on financial education. We just launched it, and it's going well because people realize that they don't get this in school. You've got to get this information on your own. And so why not just watch these videos that will help you understand things? And then, the law, people don't understand the law. So Ted will tell you about the book he wrote.
That's right. So as we all know, financial education is not taught in schools, and a lot of people don't know about it. But there's another topic that we're very familiar with that most Americans have no clue about, and that's the law. So I've been working on a book the past 2.5 years, and it's designed to simplify everything I learned in law school for middle and high school kids. And the best part is that it's narrated by a dog whose master is an attorney, and the dog sits in a dog bed next to the attorney's desk every day at work. It also comes with a card game too. So you read the book and then you reinforce your knowledge in the card game. You could play it. I don't know if you have any kids or family members, but the plan is that you buy them together, you read the book, and then you play the card game. And so the plan with that is that it just gives people a baseline understanding of our legal system. What happens when they get in trouble, civics, the Constitution, all these really, really important things that aren't being taught in school and a lot of people don't understand. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to come out sometime next year. It's called Greenback's Book of Law and Card
Greenback's.
Game. And it's narrated by Greenback the Golden Doodle.
Of course it is. Greenback's. What was the name of it one more time?
Greenback's Book of Law.
Got it.
And the narrator is Greenback.
Got it.
Yep. And the tagline is Legal Knowledge Unleashed.
Well done. I'm curious, obviously it's a no-brainer for kids to know this stuff too, but I got to ask, what was the catalyst? Did you get in trouble, Ted?
Luckily I did not. I mean, I've gotten in trouble in the past, but nothing to the point where I had to go into court for it. I think it started kind of with, the whole genesis of TENERO is that there wasn't any resource out there that simplified everything I learned in law school for a younger age demographic. Mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed is that the only people who know the law are attorneys. But I personally believe that every American should at least have a baseline understanding of our laws and legal system, because if they do, and if they learn it earlier on, it's really going to help them out in the future. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you buy my book now and you're 12 to 18, it's the ounce of prevention. Because if you have some sort of legal knowledge before you graduate high school, it's going to save you a lot of time and money in the future. It could prevent you from going to court. You can have knowledge when you're signing off on contracts. You can respect the legal system, understand the Constitution and civics. I think the payoffs are going to be just tremendous for these young kids.
Yeah, I was going to ask, right? Because obviously people are listening to this podcast. They're going to be somewhere between 30 to 35. And so they're thinking about, I wish my kids had this type of thing, right? And you mentioned one of the things, which is for someone that's 12 to 18 or after that too, of course, build on a foundation, is learning to look at things like contracts, understand the legal system, etc. I mean, what comes to mind for me is like
okay, like when I'm going to go to get my first credit card, if I'm going to sign for my first apartment, if I'm going to go for my first house, like all these kinds of use cases are where it really comes into play. Can you mention just like quickly one or two or just a couple more? Because I want the ahas for the 30 to 35-year-old father and mother listening to this, be like, that is the thing that my kid really needs to know and I should think about.
Right. So I think the first thing is just any contracts. I think it's important to understand how contracts are formed, what happens when people breach them. So, this could be credit cards, this could be at the grocery store, this could be an employment contract. It covers property law too. So, buying a house, how it has to be in writing, recording a deed, title transfers, things of that nature. Um, it also covers tort law, which is effectively bad behavior. So, there's a character in the book who misbehaves and gets himself into lots of trouble. And that hits near and dear to me because there was an incident at a high school where some kids vandalized the school. And my next door neighbor was one of the kids who was involved with that. It's unfortunate because he's a really nice kid, but he just didn't understand that his actions have consequences. And I've noticed that there's a lot of teens out there in today's day and age who feel the same way. They get careless. They think that they're invincible, but this guy, he could face jail time for what he did. Yeah. So it covers all these things, contracts, property, torts. We didn't even talk about civics in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And if you're 30 to 35, if you're like me, maybe you didn't have a legal background. I mean, this could be for you too. And maybe you have friends who have maybe you have kids who are 12 to 18, or you have friends who have kids who are 12 to 18. This is really for anyone who just wants to have a better understanding of things that affect their everyday lives.
The other thing is, people are always taught to be scared of the law. And I blame some of my lawyer brethren for that. The more complicated it is, the more you can charge for it. But, the law is for all of us. It's the foundation of our system. And if you understand it, you're going to see, that's why the government did this. Oh, that's why we have these protections. It just helps you understand our whole society if you have an appreciation of the law. And that's what Greenback's Book of Law does. And like Ted says, it's not only for kids. I mean, a whole couple generations have gone through school without learning the law. And so, why not learn it now? And play a card game to really learn.
The game, absolutely. I mean, well done on that too.
Well, there's a cash flow box right in the corner up there. I don't know if you could see it, but it's kind of like Rich Dad, Poor Dad to cash flow. It's Greenback's Book of Law, and then you play Greenback's card game.
Well done. Complimentary. I love the idea of giving that as gifts as well. That really does make the difference. I'm going to close out here. Unfortunately, I've definitely got more questions, but I got to close out. I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes too. Absolutely. And goes out with the newsletters. I have to ask this one is a week before we close out. And Garrett, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think the question is, what have you learned being around some, rich dad advisors, your experience over the last 35 years? I mean, I give you some time to kind of collect yourself on this because, there's one of the key foundations is being around people that are really smart. You have you've been really fortunate to do that too. So, what is something that you can think of? It doesn't have to be the number one thing, just something you can think of.
Right off the top, when I became associated with Robert Kiyosaki, I was much younger, but he asked me flat out, are you investing in real estate? And, I really hadn't been. I wish I'd started much earlier, but, Robert really got me into investing in real estate, and thank goodness he did. So, I mean, Robert's Robert. He doesn't, you get what you see what you get. And he got on my case about investing in real estate, and it turned out great.
I love it. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
You'd mentioned your site again. Is there anywhere, I'll make sure those in their show notes. Is there anywhere else you would love for people to connect with you at?
Well, TENERO Official, if they want to subscribe at YouTube, and then Corporate Direct, and then look for Ted's book, Greenback's Book of Law.
Outstanding. Get the books.
And it'll be unleashed sometime next year.
Well done, Ted. Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.